Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Nordic Football Podcast 2021. We are back. I'm Steve Wiss. I'm joined by Jonathan Verdugba, and we're ready for a great season and summer ahead in Scandinavia. So, how are you doing, mate?
Hi, Stephen. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast 2021. We had a nice little break, and I'm delighted to be joining you again. We've had 2 months off, is it? I think the last time I spoke to you, we were cracking our Christmas crackers and talking about our favourite chocolates and favourite foods and all that kind of stuff. So now it's the cracking of spring is coming along, isn't it? And winter is here, and gradually, next thing you know, we'll be in March. So things are gradually sort of resuming, aren't they, in Scandinavia? And it's a pleasure to be with you for another season.
Yeah, I'm delighted to be back, and I'm really hoping that I think we can get a really good, consistent run of episodes together this year. It's one of our objectives to be more regular, consistent, and more great content for you listeners to enjoy. So I'm looking forward to this season ahead with you, Jonathan. And, I hope you wintered well so far and recharged your batteries. I'm raring to go myself. Looking forward to this summer ahead.
Yeah, and this is season 5 of the Nordic Football Podcast. So certainly, nobody can accuse us of being fair weather podcasters, can they? We've been in it for a long haul now, and definitely looking to the excitement ahead in season 5. And of course, the main reason for this episode and the main reason for us coming back is because there's an exciting tie coming up this week, isn't there, Steve? And that's where we're going to start this podcast this week. A juicy game.
Yeah, the main meat of this episode, if you excuse the pun, is going to be Molde against Hoffenheim Europa League preview. We've got a guest, Archie Rhind Tutt, Bundesliga expert, to talk about Hoffenheim. And we also, after that, we're going to be talking about a bit of off-season moves in Norway, Sweden, a couple of other things, maybe certain player moves. I think there's one in particular that you're very excited about, this move to Sweden from Norway. And maybe at the end, if we've got a bit of time, we'll talk a bit about Suomen Cup in Finland, our favourite cup competition, as we know, Jonathan. So, yeah, looking forward to this episode ahead. And Molde versus Hoffenheim in Europa League. And are you pleased to see the return of European competition this week?
Yeah, it doesn't feel so long ago that we were watching the Champions League final, does it? And it's strange to think that was August now, and we're in February. So, the time, lockdown life is certainly the days tend to mold into one, don't they? It doesn't feel like 6 months or 7 months. But I caught the Barca PSG game this evening, and it was a fantastic match. Really, really had a warm feeling after it, watching Kylian Mbappe do what he did. And I think, really, it's the pinnacle of European competition, to be honest, isn't it? There's nothing better, to be honest, than a big Champions League night, in my opinion. And, who knows, maybe some of these sides can make it to that Champions League group stage in the coming season. We've also got the Europa Conference League coming up, haven't we? Which we're going to talk about maybe in future episodes. We might leave it to one side for this week. But the main focus now is the Europa League, and it's Molde against Hoffenheim. Now, obviously, as you mentioned, there's going to be an interview. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Bundesliga. But from your perspective, Steve, as Mr. Norway, what's been the latest goings on with Molde? How's their preparation been for this game? What's the latest in terms of the match? And what's the outlook, Steve, for Molde? How are they feeling in the camp going into this huge game?
Well, first thing we've got to say is the match is actually, the first leg is going to be played in Spain, in Villarreal. It's to do with border controls. Basically, Hoffenheim are not allowed into Norway. There's been a few cases of that around this week, hasn't there? The next 2 or 3 weeks, I think there's quite a few ties moved to neutral venues. So Villarreal for the first leg. Second leg is going to be in Germany. I mean, the big problem for any teams, not Norway, Sweden, Finland, if it ever happened, even Denmark to a degree, and some of the Eastern European leagues like Ukraine, Russia had this problem before. Excuse me, is that there's always a winter break or the off season, and if you're facing a team from a main European league, they're going to be much sharper. They're in the crunch part of their campaign, and it's so much difficult to actually compete with them, and it can take you quite a number of games to get back your sort of match sharpness and things. Molde have had a recent friendly cancelled against Rosenborg due to a COVID case. It was all out of precaution, really, in the Rosenborg side, but they just probably haven't been able to get as much match time out there as they would want recently. They've lost Lecky James to a Saudi Arabian club. They've Uwe Umoiwanfo is injured. He's got a knee problem, so he's ruled out of this match, probably both legs as well, I think. In fact, he's going to be out for several weeks. So I don't think preparation's that great, to be honest, for Molde. And I certainly think they'll be rusty in this game, but it's a no-pressure situation. They're going to give it their best shot, and it's they're underdogs for a reason.
Yeah, and there's been one or two transfers, as you mentioned, which we'll talk about. I think they've got one or two additions to their squad, haven't they? I think Berg Riese is one. Perhaps is it Sigurdarsson, maybe another that you'll talk about. I mean, talk about Lecky James there. He was the star of one of our episodes in season 3. Final episode of season 3, I think, was an interview about 2 years ago with Lecky James, who had just won a title at that point. He's a player that we've looked upon fondly. He was a really nice guy, wasn't he, having won the show? As he leaves to Al Qadisiyah, I believe the name is, of the Saudi Arabian club, probably a nice little pay packet there in store for him in the Saudi Arabian League. What's your overall, tribute to Lecky James's contribution in Norwegian football?
I can't rate him high enough. I can't speak highly enough of him. He's probably been one of my favourite players in the last few years since he came back to Molde, and incredible player in terms of clinicality. Shot on target ratio has been usually around the 50% mark, which is right up there with the best in the league. I sense he was a big game player, and I think he was quite an influence in the dressing room for that. You often saw him on Instagram or Twitter before or after a game, and he would kind of be some sort of motivational comment, be it good or bad. Things like that. And, we did the interview with him, and I sensed that he was very laid back and relaxed. And I think that helped him in terms of his composure. You can tell in front of goal, I would always back him in a one-on-one situation, Lecky James. I think he just had that finishing ability about him. And apart from the penalty misses that he came up with occasionally, really top player, and he'll be a loss for sure. And good luck to him in Saudi Arabia, and the same with Armal Pellegrino as well from Christian's son. They're both going there. They're going to get well paid, and good luck to them. They've got to look after their own careers.
And there's been a few departures of Molde as well, apart from James, and one of them is Henry Wingo, who's moved on. Will he be missed in this game? And tell us also about, while you're at it, tell us about the arrivals at Molde, Berg Riese, and what you know about the new arrivals potentially. How could they impact this game? Will they play? Will they be involved? Are they ready?
I think Henry Wingo's left to Ferencváros in Hungary for nearly £700,000, which I think is a lot of money. I think Wingo is not worth that much. I wouldn't have forked out that much anyway. He's basically converted Winger into a right back. So I don't know where Ferencváros are going to play them. I don't know what system they play. Maybe they're using a wing back system, which would work well. He's quite similar to Trent Alexander-Arnold as a player, actually. Nowhere near as good as that level, of course, but the best part of his game is his passing and his offensive contributions. He's actually, I don't think he's that good a defender, a little bit like Trent. Some people might disagree with me there, but it's the weak part of his game. So he's certainly not a right back as such, but he's certainly not someone for me that's worth £700,000. I think Molde have done quite well there. Will he be missed? Not really too much. I think he added nice depth, but he wasn't always a banker starter, and he wouldn't call him a stud player. And remember last season, Christopher Harold's side was ruled out all whole year with an ACL injury. They'll have him back, and he'll be ready to go again. So he's out. Coming in, no one really yet of note. Bjørn Sigurdsson's coming from Lillestrøm. He is a player that's been around the block. He's been at Molde before. Whether or not his best goal scoring days are behind him now, I'm not sure. He's a kind of an experienced journeyman, really. He's been all over the block, but that experience could help him out. Whether or not he's quite up to sharpness yet, I don't know. That's my big concern ahead of these Europa League ties. They're just going to be found out, be too rusty.
Yeah, and of course, it's a very different climate in Norway to Villarreal, isn't it? In Spain, been there before, and it's a beautiful town, beautiful city, and the surrounding areas. It's a really nice place. I remember having a sort of a midday siesta there with a few beers. Went to watch Villarreal. Back in the days when Diego Forlan was up front for them, which was quite a while ago now. But yes, how do you think they'll adapt to that, Steve? That change of climate? Will it be a big loss to them not having home advantage? Molde have only. The last time they were in this point of the competition was 2016, and they lost, of course, in their last 32. Whereas Hoffenheim is actually their debut at this stage of the competition. So Molde may have a little bit more advantage in terms of experience, but they're certainly going to go into it as the underdogs, aren't they? The German side are unbeaten at this level of the competition so far. So how do you think the venue of it will affect the tie potentially, if at all?
I think it might give them a boost, actually. Remember, most of these teams in Norway, the bigger teams, used to have their warm weather camp around this time of year, to Marbella or wherever, where there's a bunch of golf courses and stuff like that. Of course, that's not going to happen this year, is it? So I don't know how long Molde are actually going to be out there for, but I've looked at the weather forecast. It's going to be sunny, 17 degrees. That's like a balmy hot day, isn't it, in Molde in the middle of summer? Perhaps. So it's going to take a little bit of getting used to. But I think if it was me, if I was flying out to Spain for a couple of days right now, I'd be loving it. I'd be loving a bit of sunshine on me. So hopefully it will improve the morale of the players, and maybe the warmer climate will help bring some good football on show. And we're going to talk about Hoffenheim very, very soon with the interview with Archie. But it sounds like they're quite attacking, so Molde will get some chances themselves, I think. It's a question of whether they can take them or not. It's going to be really weird that if Hoffenheim score, then it's going to be an away goal, isn't it? It's just that just feels very strange, but that's the way we are these days.
Yeah, and there's a young player as well. I don't know if you know about him from Angers called Datro David Fofana, an 18-year-old, I think, from the Ivory Coast. Do you know much about him as well? Is he a sort of a bit of a rookie, or is he known in France at all? Who Molde have brought in? He's in their Europa League squad for the match, so could potentially be involved.
I have to say, this is not a player that I know anything about at all. So let's see. There's been Africans before that have come up to Scandinavia, have made a really big impact, and he could be anything. I can't comment on myself though, because I've not seen him.
Fair enough. We'll keep an eye out for him, because he looks like maybe a young player to keep an eye on. Who knows? Hard to tell, really. Not too much information around about him, but certainly looks like he's going to be featuring in the squad, born in 2002. So we'll move on to the interview with Archie in a second. But before we do, Steve, in the context of the match, how big is it from a Norwegian perspective? How is it kind of accepted that Hoffenheim will win, or is there a feeling that this could be a big chance to go further than Molde have been in Europe for some time?
I don't think too many fellow Norwegians will be cheering them on. They're not a particularly well-liked club up there. But, from our perspective, it obviously is quite interesting, isn't it, to see someone at this stage, and we kind of would like them to continue their journey. I don't think anyone expects them to get past Hoffenheim. They're the current second worst favourites with the bookmakers at about 600-700 to 1. Only Wolfsberger, who have got Spurs. By the way, how on earth are Spurs joint favourites to win the Europa League? I have no idea. I wouldn't place monopoly money on Spurs right now to win that. But yeah, Wolfsburg are only a bigger price than Molde, and that kind of sums it up. Hoffenheim, you would probably expect to get past them fairly comfortable. I don't think there's any expectations as such, but you just never know, do you, in football? They can enjoy it in that. I don't really think too much has been made of it. I think it's a really good achievement what Molde have managed. It doesn't happen very often. It's probably not being celebrated as much as it should be because of the club are not that popular and things like that. And maybe with these Corona times, you just, there's no chance of a big crowd, and get things excited that way.
Fair enough. Let's go straight to the interview then with Archie, and I'm looking forward to listening to this.
So when this draw was announced, I racked my brains and thought, who can we get in for a really great opinion, an expert on Hoffenheim and German football? And the first name that sprung to my mind was Archie Rhind Tutt, who's someone I followed for many years. His Bundesliga knowledge is superb. He's a Bundesliga reporter on the ground for ESPN. I've heard him on other podcasts as well. His knowledge over there is second to none, and a fantastic guy as well. So, we caught up on Saturday, actually. It was before the latest round of Bundesliga fixtures. So I think that, a couple of things may even be out of date, like injuries and stuff may have happened since then. So bear that in mind. But, here is the interview with Archie. I'm delighted to be joined on this episode of the Nordic Football Podcast by Archie Rhind Tutt. Archie, thanks very much.
All good, Steve. Good to talk to you.
So, a big Europa League match between Molde and Hoffenheim coming up. Well, certainly big in terms of the Scandinavian region, it's not very often we get Molde, any Norwegian team really make the knockout phase. So I just wanted to get a bit of an opinion about Hoffenheim. Let's find out a bit about them. And first of all, their route into this phase of the Europa League, has it been quite straightforward?
Yeah, it has been. Much more straightforward than their previous European campaigns, where they've really struggled. But there was a real, I think, concerted effort to try and fight a little bit better in Europe than they have done on their previous occasions. Not that they've been actually probably too far away in terms of the performances, but the results have been far off their ambitious intentions. In the previous occasion, you had Julian Nagelsmann as coach, for example, in their first season, where they were knocked out by Liverpool of the Champions League qualification. But then again, they were able to make it into the Champions League group stages under Nagelsmann. But still, they create lots of chances and were then punished for not taking them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at their actual league position now in the Bundesliga. Not that great, actually. I expected them to be probably in a better position. So, what's been going wrong there?
I think you're speaking for the club as well and their fans, in that they were expecting more. They made a surprise coaching change from the outside at the end of last season when they replaced Alfred Schreuder, who went off to be Ronald Koeman's assistant coach at Barcelona. But it wasn't like that was with Hoffenheim's blessing. It was more that Hoffenheim and Schreuder parted ways because Hoffenheim weren't happy with what Schreuder was doing. And it makes you think, well, how ambitious a club that this is, because of, I think, everything that was achieved under Julian Nagelsmann, even before money had been invested. But the aim of Dietmar Hopp was that this would be a self-sufficient club all the same. And this season, under Sebastian Hoeneß, who is famously the son of Dieter Hoeneß and therefore the nephew of Uli Hoeneß, he'd been coach at Bayern Munich's second team, done very well with them, winning the third division, which is very rare for a second team to do that. And the aim was for him to take Hoffenheim forward into those European places again. But he has had to face an unbelievable run of injuries, I would say. The fact that your captain and best defender, Benjamin Hübner, is injured just before the season begins is less than ideal. And I think about 9 different players at least have been used at centre-back so far. When you're playing a back three a lot of the time, well, that's a lot. So that's been taken into account. I think that's why he still holds the position now. They are happier working with him than they were with Alfred Schreuder before. And they've still been creating chances. They've still had their moments. I think beating Bayern Munich in the second game of the season raised expectations to a very high level. Expectations that weren't able to be then met because it was a while before they then won a game. But it wasn't like they've been playing terribly all season long. They've been having good phases in games. It's just when they're not on it, they're defensively have been shaky, shall we say.
Who would you say are there 2 or 3 key players to watch out for in these Europa League matches against Molde?
Well, you have to make the provision with Hoffenheim if they're fit. So I would say Andrej Kramaric is the leading player in this squad, who I'm surprised he's still at Hoffenheim. Had it not been for maybe the odd injury coming at the wrong time, maybe he would have gone elsewhere. But he is a very impressive striker, somebody that Molde need to be very wary of. Christoph Baumgartner as well, whilst maybe could have had 1 or 2 more goals this season, he looks very sharp going forward. He's able to take chances sometimes just with this panache that you would expect of a more seasoned pro than he is. He's only 21, so he's certainly one to watch out for as well. And I would say as well that whilst he can have his moments, Oliver Baumann is an important player for them in goal, particularly when it comes to giving them impetus from the back, and is capable of big performances as well. So those would be the three I would highlight.
Well, thanks for that. In terms of when this draw was announced, I think Molde, from a club in their perspective, you either want to face the easiest possible draw or a really big team. And no disrespect here to Hoffenheim, they're kind of in between that, aren't they? They're kind of a bit, Molde are underdogs here. They're not expected probably to win, but at the same time, it's not a great tie in terms of that. How do Hoffenheim perceive this draw, do you think? Will they expect to come through easily?
No, I don't think so. I think that this is a team which is fighting for its glamour. This is a club that is trying to make itself a more attractive place for players to come. And you look at the players that they've attracted there. These are players who you wouldn't have been surprised if they'd maybe gone elsewhere to more tradition-laden clubs. But the fact that they came to Hoffenheim, I think of the likes of Samasiku, Munas Dabur, for example, even being able to hold on to Andrej Kramaric, for example. These are players who are ready, or you would have expected to maybe push on another level or so. So for Hoffenheim, it's important for them to make a name for themselves in Europe. The fact that they've been in the Champions League, and even that's your perspective, I think shows you that they still have some work to do in that sense. So they'll take the game against Molde very seriously. I wouldn't see them. I don't think it'll be a case of them underestimating them on any front. It's just a case of, can they bring the performance that they need, and can they bring the defensive stability that has been lacking all too often this season.
The actual general perception of the Europa League in Germany, how is it seen, Archie? Because there's certain countries it's kind of disrespected a bit, but I always sense that in sort of mainstream Europe, it means a bit more.
It depends on the club. So, for example, when Eintracht Frankfurt were in the Europa League a couple of seasons ago, it was only the season before last, and the one and last season as well. It was taken extremely seriously. You saw the fact that even their third round qualifier against the fact I can't remember the country, I think says it was not the most prestigious opponent in Europe. It was full. It was completely full, and this is a game in July and August. So if it's a club like that where they've not played in Europe for a long time, even say Cologne as well, then it's taken with a lot of it's taken very seriously. But you see good numbers for Hoffenheim's games when it's been on terrestrial television here, RTL. And when it's been shown there, then actually they've probably been doing surprisingly good numbers. But I'd still say that in previous seasons, the Europa League has maybe not been taken as seriously by some other clubs. But I think that in the last two seasons, you've seen more of a switch in mentality. And I think that now it's really prioritised, and particularly from Hoffenheim, given the fact that they've not managed to make a knockout round before.
Interesting, yeah. So there's actually been a fixture rearrangement here for the first leg. It will not be in Norway because Norway's very, very strict with their border controls at the moment. And the first leg is actually going to be in Spain, Villarreal. Now, I've heard it's been a very cold period in Germany recently. In fact, I do believe your own water bottle was freezing last night from a tweet I saw. Do you think this... Do you think this will it will kind of suit Hoffenheim to go down to Spain, a bit of a warm climate there, to play suit their style, their attacking style?
I think it'll have a similar effect on Molde. I think both teams might be. I've not checked the weather in Villarreal. So I don't know how much warmer it will be.
That's a good point. It might be cold there as well. It's been
well. I know that. Look, this is going to sound. This is going to sound like I've not been following Spanish weather all that closely, which is true. But I do know that there was snow in Madrid recently. Spain does have the capacity to be cold as well. But yeah, I would imagine that it will be a little bit warmer for them.
So just to wrap things up, then, you're expecting Hoffenheim to be pretty attack-minded in both fixtures. That's the sort of style they are.
Yeah, that's one of the tenets of Sebastian Hoeneß's style of play. He is ambitious. They want to go forward. It's just been a case of taking their chances. If you look at the chances they created, for example, in their last two Bundesliga games against Eintracht Frankfurt and against Bayern Munich, then on expected goals, then they're actually level with both of their opponents there. The problem is they lose the Eintracht Frankfurt game 3-1, and they lose the game to Bayern Munich 4-1. So it's being able to make the most of those spells of pressure, and I think getting something approaching a settled unit as well. If you look at the amount of players that they have out, even for Saturday's game against Borussia Dortmund, Kevin Akpoguma, a centre-back, Ermin Bacacic, a centre-back, Benjamin Hübner, not played since the start of the season, but a centre-back, Havard Nordvay, a centre-back, Ryan Sessegnon, also been used at centre-back this season. These are a lot of injury issues that they're having to put up with. And I think as much as anything, it's can the side that Sebastian Hoeneß puts out find a way to gel together, because I think that for long periods this season the stability in the lineup has been missing, and that's not necessarily Sebastian Hoeneß's fault.
And dare we ask you for a prediction for these ties?
I'd say that Hoffenheim will go through, but I don't know that much about Molde, so I could be speaking too soon.
And actually, for those who've been intrigued from what they've heard from you here about Hoffenheim and German football, where can people find you?
They can find me online at ArchieRT1 on Twitter, and I'm also on every now and then on the Guardian's Football Weekly podcast, and also on ESPN FC covering the Bundesliga.
Actually, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate you appearing on the Nordic Football Podcast. Thanks very much. Stay safe and take care.
Cheers, Steve. You too.
Cheers.
Welcome back, and I'm glad that it's not as cold as the water bottles that Archie's carrying around to games. But that was a really, really fascinating interview and a good insight into Hoffenheim, the Bundesliga club. Steve, I'm going to put you on the spot before we move on to recent winter updates, transfers, that kind of thing. Molde, Hoffenheim, what's your prediction for this game? How do you see it going? From a tactical point of view to start with, maybe formation-wise, do you see any weaknesses maybe that Molde, or strengths of Molde's that they can exploit? And, finally, do you have a prediction in mind? I know you like a little prediction.
Yeah, I think after, hearing about Hoffenheim from Archie, that I think both ties will be open. And I could see Hoffenheim probably winning both matches, something like 3-1. But I think there could be, who knows if there'll be if there's any complacency from Hoffenheim, and Molde maybe could take advantage. It sounds like they'll leave themselves a little bit open at times, but probably got too much offensive strength and quality. So I'm going to say Hoffenheim on aggregate go through 7-3.
Well, that's some prediction. You should put that might be a cheeky fiver on it, because if you get that right, you're going to be quids in.
It's very exact, I know. I think Hoffenheim will win both legs.
So you're saying that the game itself will be 7-3 or aggregate?
On aggregate, I think they'll win both legs. Let's say 3-2 in the first leg. What does that leave? 4-1 in the second? Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, nobody can ever accuse Meat Man Tucker of sitting on the fence. That is one hell of a call. Let's see if he's right or if he's wrong. But great stuff. And tune into that game. It's on Thursday. I think it's 8 p.m. kickoff in the UK time. So should be an interesting game. Let's move on now, Steve, because we're gonna. Last time I spoke to you, we were talking about Buda Glimt. and we dissected our team of the season with Y Scout, and we were reviewing everything. But it's we're not too far away now from the new campaign. We're a couple of months away, and teams have been sort of doing their winter business, looking to revitalise their squads. What's the latest from Norway at this early stage of pre-season?
Not too much in terms of ins. There's more outs than ins, but I think the one that really sticks out to me recently this week is the departure from Stabæk of Emil Berhinen. Now, he's the son of Lars Berhinen. We've talked about him on this podcast quite a lot of times before, a very good midfielder. What really stuck out to me is the actual fee, 1.35 million to CSKA in Moscow. Now, all right, that might not sound a lot to some people, but that's a lot of money for a club like Stabæk. It's not often they will sell someone they have actually sold some good assets in recent years, but I think 1.35 million in this current climate is quite a good price. I actually think it's a good buy as well for CSKA, by the way. I think they can certainly invest a very good talent and probably sell him on for way more down the line if he develops. But at this stage, I think that's good money for Stabæk. We knew he was going to leave the league. It was just a question of where. But it looks to me like a good career move. And I think, for all three parties, it makes sense. So that one stuck out to me straight away now. Yeah,
and I had a question on my personal account about Berhinen, asking, what kind of player is he? What's his style of play? That kind of thing. We did actually write a piece on Y Scout for him on the Y Scout blog, our partners. And can you just give an update in terms of, for anyone who maybe didn't read that, what can we expect from him? Because he's quite highly rated, isn't he?
He's a very good tackler, interceptor, positionally astute. He's a really good positional player in sort of. He's a midfielder, central midfielder, sort of deep line playmaker sort of guy in that deeper role. He's got a good pass on him, but he's got all the sort of qualities you need from a player in that area, and he has developed physically as well in the last sort of 18 months. To a level where, I actually don't know much about the Russian league these days, to be brutally honest. So I don't know what sort of physical standard or technical level it is, but I would imagine he can certainly. It's actually quite refreshing to see someone go there rather than Turkey or Belgium, to be honest.
What position is he, Steve?
A defensive midfielder.
And he's about, how old is he, 21-ish?
Yeah, he's certainly not that old. He's, let me just check his actual age. 21 years old exactly, 22 in March. So he's getting to that age where he can, I think it's a perfect time for him to switch.
And the question I actually had from Elliot Rothwell was, what's his distribution like? And he says, we have fond memories of Scandinavian defensive midfielders recently. We have never really gotten over the losses of Rasmus Elm and Pontus Wernbloom. So I think he's a CSK fan. What is your viewpoint on his distribution there, Steve?
Yeah, good. I think he's got a good vision, really, both long and short. It's got better over the last 12 months, and he needed to test himself in a better league, to be honest. So I think it's a good signing for CSK. I think this guy could go very well there. I don't see him coming back to Norway. You sometimes get these signings go out of Scandinavia and they're back within, 18 months. But I think his next destination after CSKA will be somewhere better, or either that, or he actually does pretty well at CSKA and in Knuckles and stays there for a while. I just don't see him going back. He's too good for that.
Yeah, and I remember you talking about him last season as well. So it sounds like it's an interesting pickup for the Russian league, and one for Elliot hopefully to enjoy as a fan. What else have we got in terms of business? Is that the main piece of business? Because obviously Starpet, you mentioned the money. There's not been too many sales of that kind of level of pricing, has there? And when you look at Starpet, who finished mid-table last season, they finished sort of bang on 8th. Could they use that money to sort of maybe push up the table a little bit this season, or is it going to just be going into consolidating? And has there been any other clubs bringing in that kind of level of cash?
Not as of yet. I mean, we talked about Henry Wingo getting 700,000 for Molde. I mean, I sometimes wonder where the money for Starbeck actually goes. I guess just to general costs and stuff, because they never seem to really invest players themselves. They've had some great youngsters come through. They've managed to sell, but I don't think this window is really, the transfer season up in Scandinavia has really truly kicked off yet. And whether or not it be maybe a bit quieter than normal as well due to sort of Corona times, but there certainly hasn't been that amount of money in. I'm just actually looking around if anyone has got remotely close. There's actually hardly been any cash sales apart from Molde and the odd other one around. So I tell you, one player that did catch my eye as an incoming though. It's a free transfer to Strømsgodset, and this is a player who's torn up this league before in the past. It didn't work out for him in Holland. Someone called Fred Friday, who is a Nigerian player, and I've always been a big fan of him. Not just his name either, which is a fantastic name, isn't it, Fred Friday? But he used to be a really top finisher, and I was praising Lecky James earlier in this podcast. He's a similar sort of striker, a bit not as big of a physical unit, but he's fast. And he went to AZ at Alkmaar. He actually scored some goals there. He wasn't an absolute shambles by all means, but for Strømsgodset to bring him back to the Elite Serie, I think that's an absolutely fantastic move, to be honest. Fred Friday. I mean, this is a guy that cost AZ Alkmaar 1.35 million from Lillestrøm in 2016. So,
is that genuinely his name, Fred Friday?
Fred Friday, yeah.
I don't know what's better, Fred Friday or Fred Flintstone. It's a pretty stunning name.
Yeah, he's
from Port Harcourt in Nigeria. Imo Fred Friday.
He's scored. He's got a great history in Elite Serie. 22 goals and 6 assists from 59 appearances. In the Eredivisie, 11 goals and 4 assists from 41 appearances, which is not too bad, I don't think. He's also scored goals in Belgium. This is a proven goal scorer, which will serve Strømsgodset very well. I think this is a stud signing for them.
Fair enough, Fred Friday. Keep an eye out on him, but just make sure you tune in on. Don't tune in on one Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. We'll move on, and one of the teams I wanted to ask you about, or maybe you might actually want to ask me about, because it seems like their recruitment policy is entirely based on signings from Sweden, is Rosenborg. They've been quite active so far, haven't they? And they've brought a couple of players in from the Swedish League.
They have. They've got Vecchia in from Sirius. Augustinsson from Djurgården, and we talked about him before. I think he sounds like a good addition. And then someone called Adam Andersson from Häcken, who I'm sure you're going to tell us a bit more about. They've brought in... there's a bunch of loanees have come back as well. And knowing Rosenborg, they'd probably try and use some of these loanees. There've been a few outgoings as well. Vegard Hegenstad has gone to Turkey on a free transfer. They've actually managed to pocket 90,000 for Georgia Denic to Apol Limassol in Cyprus. Goodness knows what they're smoking to be paying £90,000 for him. That's just free cash. That is unbelievable. And Parkanate, who he's left as well. Tor Reginson has actually moved to Germany for St. Pauli, the veteran centre-back. They'll miss him, his presence at the back. Samuel Adegbenner has gone to Norrköping. I'm sure we'll talk about him. And a few other signings as well. Jermund Assen has moved on loan to Lillestrøm. So plenty of ins and outs at Rosenborg, but I think they needed that. They needed a wake-up call from, they need to be back there challenging for titles.
Yeah, and in terms of Adam Andersson, just quickly on him, moving to Rosenborg as a left back, can play right back as well if he needed to. I saw him quite a lot when I was out in Sweden, because he was at Bäckhaken, which was just down the road from me, in Göteborg and Hisingen. I've always wanted a bit more from him, to be honest. I've always thought that there's potential there. He's a Swedish international, 2 caps for Sweden, but he's always shown a great deal of promise, been talked about a lot, but never really sort of just quite kicked on. And I've always just been left wanting a little bit more. He's got a brother who I think went off to Denmark. And I just think that this could be the opportunity for him now. He's 24, so he's not young. When I was out there, he was just coming through. He was a youngster at the time, but 21-ish, and was considered really highly rated. The move to Rosenborg is probably a bit of a step up, although Häcken are on the up these days. But I think it's a challenge for him that he probably needs, and maybe a fresh change of scenery, new environment. Maybe he can kick on. Vecchia, I think, is going to be a really interesting signing. I know there was quite a few teams in Serie A and other places looking at him in the Netherlands as well. So I think that's a bit of a coup potentially for Rosenborg if he can, adapt to that league. I know that there's been some question marks about him in the sense of, last season he was incredible and one of the players of the season, but before that, was he really kicking up trees? And, there was a talk of, is that just maybe a one-off season for him maybe? And that'll be the question now. Can he prove himself again consistently? So I'll certainly be keeping an eye on Rosenborg, because I think they've got a Swedish sporting director, haven't they? And they've pretty much just been recruiting from Sweden, Augustinsson as well. And of course, last season they signed the striker, didn't they? From Östersund.
Yeah, there's a big Swedish influence there. They're obviously looking at the Allsvenskan, and maybe it's not the worst idea in the world. It sounds like Vecchia is going to be a good signing, and the two wide players at the back definitely could add something to the team as well. I think they did need a bit of a clear out, to be honest. Rosenborg, it might just be one of them years where they kind of, it takes them a little bit of time to settle down, and they come stronger as the season goes on. I think they certainly need to do more still. But I think it's not a bad start. At least they're active. At least they're flexing their muscles in both directions, and maybe getting rid of some players that needed to shift on as well. So
have they sold anyone? Have they lost any key players? Is there anyone that you would be like, well, that's going to be a big loss, or is it kind of just clearing out dead wood?
Tore Reginissen's a huge loss, because he was in some people's team of the year last season at centre back. I mean, I thought he had a pretty solid campaign. Look, he's a veteran. He's a legend. Massive dressing room influence, the captain. You forget about on the field. Just they're going to lose so much off the field from him. But you got to move on sometimes, haven't you? So I think he's the biggest loss. I don't think Hedenstad will be a huge departure, even though his set pieces and stuff have been pretty good for him the last couple of years. I think they can, cope without his loss. But Reginisson will be felt.
Fair enough, and I think that probably wraps it up for this part of the show. Unless you've got any final comments, any other transfers caught your eye just quickly before we move on?
Yeah, not Pacific transfers, but I think I'm just going to name a couple of clubs I'm a little bit concerned about heading into the season at this point. I think Viking and Odd need to do a little bit more. In Viking's case as well, they've got a new joint management crew as well. This is very early, and there's a long way to go. I've just got initial concerns about both. A couple of clubs that would expect to be sort of up there in the top half, maybe even higher. And I think both need to do a bit more. Otherwise, it could be a little bit of a rocky campaign.
Fair enough. I think that wraps it up, does it?
Yeah, that's it for this section.
Yep, let's move on to Sweden then. Of course, in the coming weeks, we'll be keeping an eye on it. Pre-season games are kicking off now. We'll bring you a lot more on the Nordic Football Podcast in the weeks to come. Now we're back for 2021. But for now, let's head over to Sweden, shall we, Steve?
Yeah, so what's been going on that side of the border then, Jonathan? Transfer spending, what's that been like? Has there been much money floating around this winter?
Yeah, well, it's always a useful indicator, I feel, of where the market is and what's happening in the league. I've just dropped my phone, so that's a bit of a pain. It's always a bit of a marker of what's happening, and spending has actually increased a little bit compared to last season. Of course, last season was very, with COVID and the long break between the end of the season in Sweden and the beginning of the new season, took till June, didn't it? So it was well over 6 months. There was not much spending, and clubs were extremely cautious. This year, a little bit more expenditure, but to be honest, the majority of that spending, there's been about 1.1 million euros or so spent so far. But the majority of that, I think roughly 3/4 of that, if not more, has been spent by one team, and that is Djurgården. So, yeah, so it's an interesting situation at the moment. There's teams looking to rebuild. I think the major teams have maybe brought one or two in. The likes of Djurgården or IK have been a bit active. Hammarby have been active as well. But although, to be fair, transfer market doesn't count some of the undisclosed fees. So, as an example, I know that Astrid Selmani was signed for roughly about 300,000 euros. He's not included on this transfer spending. So it may well be actually more than 1.1 million. Maybe it's around 1.5, maybe 1.6, 1.7. But it's a lot more than it was in 2020. Transfer expenditure for the entire season that year was around less than 500,000 euros. So teams are investing, teams are bringing in teams to compete, and certainly Djurgården have been very active.
Yeah. Let's just talk about Give us two or three key signings so far that have caught your eye, then, Jonathan.
Well, I think probably the biggest signing so far is that of Joel Asoro. He's returned to Sweden. Of course, he was a really highly rated talent, Swedish youth international when he left, and he went to Sunderland, and then he went to Swansea, and it's not really worked out for him. Didn't really get many opportunities, to be honest, at Sunderland or Swansea. Wasn't really, still quite young, still maturing. Didn't really turn into a sort of a stalwart of the team, so to speak. He's moved back now, and the fees reported to be £630,000. And I think Djurgården, maybe they found their Buya Toure replacement, because he is a talent. There's no doubt about that. He was, like I say, very highly rated, a good athlete, a good striker, and at 21, it will be a big responsibility for him to sort of come in and maybe carry Djurgården, who will have aspirations of winning, the league. But let's see where it goes. He's from the Bromma Academy, which, as we all know, is a very productive academy, produces some top talents. So the challenge for him now is to sort of establish himself coming back to Sweden and really kick on with his career. They've also brought in a winger called Albion Ademi from IFK Mariehamn, which I don't know too much about, to be honest. That's in the Finnish league. So he'll be one to maybe keep an eye out for. I don't know if you've been watching any games in the Suomen Cup of Mariehamn, but yeah, he's a left winger that could be interesting.
They're one of my favourite teams in Finland. I'm not joking here. They're based on a bunch of islands on the southwest coast of Finland. Is Mariehamn. So I've always had a soft spot for them.
Well, the one interesting thing with not just Djurgården but others, one trend that we're seeing at the moment is, and I think this could be partly because of COVID and just reduced finances, seeing a lot of teams recruiting from the lower leagues in Sweden now. And one example of that is at Djurgården, Isaac Hien, centre-back signed from Vasalund in the third tier. And this is a trend that we've seen a lot, actually, Steve. That's probably the biggest trend I've seen in this early part of pre-season is teams dipping into the lower leagues to sign players. Oikor have signed the player from Jönköping in the Superettan, Jetmir Haliti. He's a centre-back who's come in. Like I say, Djurgården, Isaac Hien. Sirius have been active in that market. They signed a player, I think, Ekin Bullet, who keep an eye on him because I think he's a striker who will be much talked about. He scored a lot of goals at third-tier level. Ahmed Kasim as well from Motala has joined Elfsborg. So a big trend we're seeing, I don't know so much about all these players, but a big trend we're seeing is clubs dipping down into the lower leagues to try and maybe unearth some gems. That aside, Alexander Yeremyev is back from Dresden. He's gone back to Hacken for quite a bigger fee. That's one of the other biggest fees that's been paid so far, about £350,000 roughly. So yeah, that's the main bulk of the business we've seen so far, really.
Yeah, I'm just looking at Djurgården's business now. I have to say they certainly have been rather busy. They brought in Rasmus Schuler from HJK Helsinki. I watched a lot of him when he was in MLS with Minnesota United, actually. Quite rate him. He's a really good sort of all-round versatile midfielder. I could see him going quite well there. And they've actually received a decent fee for Jesper Karlström. Lech Poznan signed him for £700,000, which is not a bad fee for any club up there in Scandinavia to receive. I just want to go back to Joel Asoro now. What is the sort of biggest strength that he's going to bring to the Allsvenskan that he could maybe tear it apart?
I'll be honest, he's not a player I've seen a huge amount of because he moved quite early and he's been in the under-23s at Sunderland, and he did emerge, played a handful of games, but hasn't really established himself, to be honest. So I'm going to be totally frank. I don't know a huge amount about him in terms of his style of play. I know he's an under-21 international who's done very well, and I know he's highly rated. But I'm not probably the person to talk about him, if I'm honest. But what I do know is he's very well thought of. Djurgården aren't going to pay that kind of money for someone if they don't feel he's going to provide real value. And I think he's a player that they could eventually sort of rejig his career and then sell on. I look at him as a kind of like a Haksabanovic, where comes back from a Premier League club, gets a big move early in his career when he's young, doesn't quite make it at that level. I question those sort of moves. Is it better to move to the Premier League when you're 17, 18, in Sweden, or is it better to just carry on your career and, you know, get first team football? Haksabanovic didn't make it at West Ham, came back and lit up the league. We'll kind of look at that as the blueprint. He has played 40 games in the Championship, though. So to be fair to him, he has got a bit of a bulk of experience, but only 1,672 minutes. So it's not, you know, he's not sort of playing in every game week in, week out when he was at these teams, you know, like, you know, when he was at Sunderland and Swansea. So, you know, 3 goals in the Championship in that time, you know, not really sort of established himself, has he? But you know, you don't get in a Championship team at sort of 19-20 if you've not got something about you.
Yeah.
So I look at it as from a point of view of Djurgården. I think this could be a real coup, and they didn't have in my opinion, they didn't have that kind of Buya Toure replacement last season. I think, you know, don't forget they won the league the year before that, and I think last season they were just a little bit toothless at times, a little bit, didn't quite have that target man, didn't quite have someone who could run in behind. I think Asoro will bring that, and yeah, I'm excited to see him in Allsvenskan this season for sure.
He sounds like a very exciting signing. I think I could see myself watching quite a bit of Djurgården matches this year. Having seen who they've brought in, I'm excited for them.
Yeah, well, there's been quite a bit of controversy about Djurgården in this off season, and it's a bit of a strange situation. The manager, Kim Bergstrand, nearly found himself out of a job. He came out on a podcast and came out with some quite untoward comments. He said that essentially that there was a lot that you can learn from the Nazis about leadership, and well, I mean, you know, in this day and age, I think it probably wasn't meant in the sentiment maybe he meant. I hope anyway. But yeah, he kind of made a comment that there was a lot to be learned about leadership and like skills like that from the Nazi regime. And at the end of the day, the comments got him in a lot of hot water. There was a lot of calls for him to be sacked. There was a lot of tension. He came out the next day and made a full apology and said that, you know, he was misunderstood in his comments, and he wasn't trying to sort of praise it. He was just saying that, you know, maybe the words were sort of out of context and you know, denied that he, you know, denied any wrongdoing. But he did get a rather sharp slap on the wrist from Djurgården's management board level. But I think he's managed to keep his job, so that will probably blow over. But yeah, it was a rocky time because there was some pretty strong calls for him to be sacked. And Bergstrand, as we've talked about in the past, him and the joint manager situation there with Thomas Lagerlof, they've been pretty good. So, you know, Djurgården, I think this season, a bit of a rejig squad, but I think they've recruited reasonably well, to be honest. And just to finalise on that as well, that, you know, they are a bit like Rosenborg in a sense. I think they've cleared out quite a lot of players. As you mentioned there, Karlström's gone. Kevin Walker's gone to Örebro on a free transfer. He was getting on a bit. Fredrik Ulvestad is a player I think they might miss. Centre midfield has gone to China. Augustinsson they've lost as well. So they have sort of gone down that path of getting rid of some players. Jonathan Ring left as well. So it's a bit of a regeneration for Djurgården, but luckily for them, they've just about managed to keep their manager in a job.
Do you know what? I can't escape anything sort of World War II related at the minute because I've actually been doing that with one of my kids. I've been doing the homeschooling. I've been basically a history teacher for the last 6 weeks, and that one of her topics she has to do is World War II. So we've been doing stuff about the Nazis and things like that. So it's just ironic you actually mention it on here. I can't escape it, Jonathan.
Well, I'm not gonna ask you if you think the Nazis were good leaders, because I think we might get this podcast shut down immediately. So let's move swiftly on that one. But yeah, certainly, as I say, you know, ill-advised, I think is probably the best word to describe it.
Well, to keep his job, I think. That's all I will say on the matter.
Yeah, I think if it was a Premier League club, I think he'd be gone. I think that the spotlight he'd be gone. You know, if Mourinho or Sam Allardyce came out of that, he'd be out. But I think maybe the less scrutiny, a bit more forgiving, you know. And people do make comments sometimes they regret, and it's fair enough. But certainly, he did upset a lot of people.
So we're going to talk about a player in particular very soon who's moved from Norway to Sweden. Before then, just caught my eye, and I feel like they deserve a mention on this podcast continually. Really, after they had a great last season, Elfsborg. Now, they have pocketed 1.3 million according to Transfermarkt already this window. Do you think they've kind of cashed in whilst their stock's high, or was it kind of unavoidable that some of their players would leave?
Elfsborg.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've had a few leave. Remy Kuyper's gone to Heerenveen for £450,000. I know that Dutch clubs have been monitoring Allsvenskan for quite a while. A big transfer as well out, which we may talk about quickly, is Paulos Abraham, who left OEK. He's gone to the Netherlands as well. I think that's the biggest departure probably of this window so far. Gone to Groningen. Big loss, really. 18-year-old. I really like him, and it's a shame that we won't get to see him, in my opinion. But yeah, Elfsborg are one of those teams. I mean, they're going to be in Europe, so they've got something to prepare for. But they it's always the way, isn't it, Steve? They're going to cash in. They've made about £1.2 million from their transfers, which is always a nice bit of income, especially with the lack of fans. Gustav Henriksen's gone to Wolfsberger in Austria, and Sivert Heldner Nielsen has gone to Belgium. So, I know a few Belgian and Austrian podcasts who may be tapping us up for opinions on those two. But yeah, I think I'll be honest. I don't think they're gonna. I don't think they keep. I mean, they're relatively decent players, but I don't think they're essential to what they're trying to do at Elfsborg. So I do think they can recover and be okay.
So that's good money, then. 1.3 million out of those.
Yeah, I think Kaib is the one I would look at and say, he was a decent player, especially going forward. He's got a bit about him in both boxes. He can get him down the pitch. I quite liked him, so I think he is. I'm not surprised to see him end up in an Eredivisie, but to be honest, I think Elfsborg will recover from that. And as I mentioned, they brought in one or two exciting players from the lower leagues that I'm interested to see how they get on. And they've also brought a lad called Andre Romer from Randers, so he's a midfielder. And we'll see how he gets on.
So we've got one sort of big talking point before we finish the episode, and I think we're going to be talking about this club throughout the whole season. Really, Norrköping, they seem to be an adventure upon themselves in these days, Jonathan. And we've got issues off the field still, but also some interesting signings that they've brought in.
Yeah, and they played a game, a pre-season game against Elfsborg actually, in the last sort of 24 or 48 hours, depending on when you're listening to this podcast. It was a 3-3 draw, and a lot of goals. And there's a player that any listener of this podcast over the last 2 or 3 years will have heard us talking about quite a bit, and a player I know you like for sure. Even his name is Samuel Erik Benro. He has crossed the divide. He has left Norway and he hopped over to Sweden, which is I'm happy to report on, because it means we can still watch him and talk about him. He's had quite a few injuries, hasn't he? But he's popped up at Norrköping. He's their big new signing. They've lost a lot of players, Norrköping, and it's been a real winter of discontent, a lot of upheaval. They really are probably the most turbulent team in the league at this moment in time. But they've got a new manager, Rickard Norling, of course. AIK won the league with a famous defensive record. Quite a coup to get him, I think, to the club. He said that he was happy with the game that they played against Elfsborg. He said we're getting stronger and stronger. Erik Benro was on the score sheet. Jonathan Levi as well, and one of the biggest sort of pieces of news in this past week or so from them is that their chairman Peter Hunt has left the club. So if the backstory of that, we talked about it at the back end of last season, but the backstory there was he was really there was a lot of people to be honest, it was a complete mess behind the scenes. People like arguing and infighting, catfighting, and a lot of discontent at the club at boardroom level. A lot of people at the club have resigned or left. Different staff members, people in different positions, and players as well. And it's led to the departure of their chairman. So, it's a chance maybe for a fresh opportunity, fresh start at Norrköping this season under a new manager, a really highly rated manager. Norling, I like him a lot. I think he's got bright ideas. I think he's a popular coach. So can he go in at Norrköping and have a similar impact that he did at OEK? We will see. But Erik Benro, I think, is a good signing.
If they can keep him fit, yeah, he's the sort of player you watch him and you can almost fall in love with him because he plays in such a way that it's fantastic to watch. I don't know whether Norland's going to play that same system he did at AEK here in Norrköping, because otherwise, if he does that, then adding Benro is basically giving me like a wide midfielder, sort of wing back almost. Or is he doing a different system? I mean, Benro is a winger, in my opinion. He needs to be sort of given a license to do what he wants in a way. I don't know whether Norling's that sort of manager. Maybe he can get the best out of him, but if he can keep him fit, he has got star talent for sure. And yeah, some interesting sort of ins and outs there. Isaac Pettersson, I know you highly rated that goalkeeper. He moved to Toulouse. I honestly think that's a strange transfer, knowing Toulouse. I said this on Twitter that Toulouse's goalkeeping situation was brilliant. They didn't need him. He's not even the number one in Toulouse. But it's a big loss for Norrköping, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I guess it means he's got nothing to lose. But Tish. But moving on, yeah, swiftly, they've replaced him with Oscar Janssen, who was the best goalkeeper in the league last season at Örebro. He's 30 years old, so he's got a big move, I think, from a career point of view. It's a bit of a step up from Örebro to Norrköping, probably, in terms of reputation of the club and probably the expectations of the club. Norrköping also brought in Victor Agardius from Mjällby. There's also brought in one or two others, from Reykjavik and Odense. So, we'll talk about them maybe in weeks to come. But they've lost Pettersson, as he mentioned there, and he was a top keeper for them. They've lost Linus Hellenius, didn't really get into the team too much. They've lost Lars Gerson, who's gone to Spain. They've lost Philip Dargestal, who I think they will miss. Finally got his big move, and he's moved to Russia with Kimki. I like him a lot, and I think that is a bit of a miss there at the back. Andreas Blomqvist as well has gone to Mjällby. So yeah, it's Eric Smith is also. I think he's left. So. Like you say, a lot of upheaval at Norrköping, and it's going to be up to Norling to kind of try and mould a new team together and blend it all together. And I think Janssen to Pettersson is a bit of a marginal step down. I think Pettersson I rate a bit higher, but Janssen just had a really, really good season last year. Talked about him on our team of the season. He was in our combined team of the year, and we talked about his coming out from the back, his proactive sort of goalkeeping, rushing out, and the amount of saves he made. So he'll hope at 30 years old that he can sort of continue his trajectory and fit into his new environment. One team I wanted to just briefly touch on before we wrap up is obviously the champions, Malmo, and they haven't bought anyone yet. So that's one to keep an eye on. But it looks like they've gone for a few sort of academy players. They've had a couple of academy players feature in their early preseason friendlies, and they've been looking pretty good. We'll keep an eye on them, but the bulk of their transfer activity has been promoting 4 players from their under-19s. So interesting one to see where that goes. They've lost 1 or 2 players. Kisa Tellin has obviously left now. He was on loan, and Berang Safari has left as well. But no real big moves yet for Malmo. So we'll keep an eye on that one.
I thought you said kinky when regarding Dargestel's departure. I had to look again, but of course there's a club in Russia called Kim Ki, isn't there? So that's an interesting one.
You just calm down there, Steve.
I got excited for a minute.
And then the other, before we wrap up, obviously the other big team that we should just briefly touch on is Hammarby. They, as I said, Astrid Selmani, we talked about him. They've also brought in a young Nigerian, Olatomi Olaniyan. They always seem to bring in at least one player a season from Nigeria. And they've also got a player from Brann, John Goodney Fjorlison. So they're looking to regenerate a little bit as well. I don't know what your thoughts are on him very quickly before we...
Cam as well of Hammarby, a speedster from MLS. He's a really quick player, David Akam. So he's going to be... He's not always got the best finish on him. In terms of Fjorlison, solid sort of centre-back. Hammarby, there's always loads of ins and outs of Hammarby every single season. It's crazy. Just looking at their list. Yeah, they're
very, very. They don't rest on the laurels at all. They're wheeling and dealing. And then the one I think probably if I was going to mention one other transfer of note to certainly, I think Palos Abraham is the biggest loss to the league in terms of just excitement and someone you want to watch. A bit of an interesting quirk, Steve. He played 30 odd games in Sweden and never played in front of fans. For Bollenpoikena and then obviously for AIK, and he's now left the league and never played a game in front of fans. Wow. Which is quite sad, really, isn't it? A sign of the times. But the other player that I think will be missed big time from the league is Georgi Kariishvili. Now he's moved from IFK Göteborg to Ferencváros as well. He's moved to Hungary to join your man over there, Wingo, and he'll be a big loss to the league and a big loss to IFK as well because he was a really lovely playmaker to watch on his day.
Have Kalmar got their Brazilian yet?
You know what? I looked out for it. Not yet. So the season's not started yet because they haven't It's early pre-season because they haven't brought in a random Brazilian.
In fact, they've only brought in Swedes and one Norwegian. That's all. So maybe the new strategy might help them out, Kalmar. So
all I'll say is watch this space.
Yeah, I think that's about it for this episode. That's all we got time for. But it's been good to be back, my friend.
Yeah, great to see you again. Don't forget, guys, this season we're going to have a bit of an emphasis on Patreon. So patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. I'd love to hear what you want us to feature on Patreon, because we're gonna have a bit of bonus content this season. I know we've said that in the past, but I mean it now. We've had a few behind the scenes conversations about what we can do with Patreon this year, so looking to make full use of that. And we'll have a few other announcements maybe to come in the coming weeks. We've been offered a fair few sponsorship deals and things like that, which we're reviewing. But in the meantime, the podcast will always, of course, remain free. But if you want to support us with a beer or the price of a couple of quid a month or whatever, get on Patreon and you'll get some access to exclusive bonus content. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter at Nordic Footpod. And we will be back to dissect the Molde Hoffenheim game, I guess, in the coming days and weeks, won't we, Steve?
Yeah, I think we're hoping to be, as I said at the start of this episode, we're hoping to be a bit more consistent and regular in terms of our episode and days this year. Hopefully we'll be back after the first leg, for sure. But from this edition, I'll say goodbye. Take care, everyone. Where can you find us on the socials, Jonathan?
Yeah, Twitter at Nordic Footpod. You can find your good self at Meatman Soccer, Steve Wiss. And you can find me, Jonathan Faduba, at JF Football, FUTBOL. And always happy to answer any questions on Sweden if you have any, or if you want to get in touch. So, yes, we will see you soon. And I hope you've enjoyed our triumphant return for 2021.